Honourable Tony Ryle.
Mr Speaker, I'd like to support the motion with respect to this debate and to strongly associate myself with, I thought, the excellent speech from the Minister of Social Development, Honourable Paula Bennett, this afternoon. And it's clear from her own personal experience and her own determination that she is decided of the view that so much more could be done for those who are on welfare to assist them to a life of independence. I thought the Prime Minister also touched on very important and pertinent facts this afternoon in question time when he talked about the creation of 62,000 new jobs and unemployment falling, which are very significant facts, especially in a time of remarkable international uncertainty. And that international uncertainty really comes from what's been described as the cancer of debt and deficit in so many parts of the world. As the Finance Minister said, you only need to turn on the television every night to see the impact of that cancer of debt and deficit on communities all around the world. The problems we're seeing in Greece, where there's rioting in the streets, services being cut back, taxes having to be paid for the first time in generations, it would seem, real pressure in Greece. In Portugal, for example, huge financial pressures on the economy there as a result of the global financial crisis. The government in Portugal is being forced to partially privatise significant public assets at the behest of the European banks and the IMF. They are having to sell significant stakes in public assets because of dictate from outside interests. If you look at Ireland, for example, they're now having to partially sell significant amounts of public assets over there, electricity companies, dams, shares in Aer Lingus, forestry assets, in order to get their debt under control. But unlike New Zealand, they have no choice about this. They are being required to do that by the IMF and the European banks. And this story is being repeated in countries like Spain, Italy, France, where the former Minister of Education says tens of thousands of teachers in France are being made redundant because of the tough economic times. And then you go across the channel to Britain, where Britain's debt in the last 5 or 6 years has grown from 30%, which is the peak where we want to get to in New Zealand, has grown from 30% of GDP to over 70% of GDP. They now have themselves in the position where the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Osborne, says Britain cannot borrow any more money. It cannot get it. And this is what happens. 70% GDP, they can't borrow any money anymore, and 700,000 public servants are expected to lose their job in the next year or so. This is what happens when debt gets out of control. Countries lose determination. They lose self-determination. New Zealand does not want to be in the position of countries like Portugal, Greece, Ireland, where they are required to make decisions because of foreign lenders demanding of them. New Zealand needs to remain independent. We must keep our debt under control. And that is what this government campaigned on in the last election. We have a plan to keep our debt under control and retain our own self-determination as a country, our own sovereignty, separated from the demands of those who are our foreign lenders. And that's why the government has a plan in the mixed ownership model, which will invite New Zealanders to be at the front of the queue to participate in up to 49% of those companies with a 10% cap on any one shareholder. And that's part of our plan to use those proceeds to help control our debt, use that money as part of a future investment fund to support the needed infrastructure in schools and hospitals that this country may have in the next 4 to 5 years. It is about controlling the debt, because if you don't control your debt, you lose your right to decide what your country does into the future. And that's no false claim. Just look at what's happening throughout Europe. It's all about the debt. But even in these most difficult economic times, This government, led by John Key, remains determined to protect and grow the New Zealand Public Health Service. We've put significant amounts of money in. $1.5 billion of extra money over the last 3 years has gone into the health budget, sees over 800 new doctors, both junior and senior, working in our hospitals, over 2,000 more nurses working in our public hospitals today on the payroll than there was 3 years ago. And together with strong leadership from district health boards, we are achieving in the New Zealand Public Health Service very considerable positive results. And they were published in your local newspaper today, Mr. Speaker, as we reported to New Zealanders on what the district health boards have done in the 6 national health targets. We're seeing more New Zealanders than ever getting elective surgery. Elective surgery is vital because it allows people to ease the pain and the suffering that they've been under, to get back to work or looking after their families better than they were. We're not having a situation where under the previous government the budget, the funding doubled and no more people got surgery. Under this government, we are delivering more and more and more operations for New Zealanders year after year after year. Improved productivity in our hospitals, much of it being led by nurses in the way that they manage the wards, etc. So more elective surgery. And our hospitals' emergency departments, the best performance we've ever had. 92% of all patients who turned up were either treated, discharged or admitted to a ward within 6 hours. That's very important. And in Western Australia, last month, they published the first analysis of an Australasian emergency department target. And in Western Australia, they have a target of treating everyone with, about 85% of patients within 4 hours. Ours is 90% within 6. But what their research has shown is that the introduction of an emergency department target in Western Australia, which has required the whole of the health service to change the way it works in order to improve the flow of patients, has saved potentially 250 lives in Western Australia. That's what their emergency department target did. It's created a whole of health system change. It means that people get dealt with sooner, and they say, it's not the government says in Western Australia, it's independent academic analysis says up to 250 lives changed. That is a quality performance unmatched by any other government in this country. Getting 92% of our patients through emergency departments into the wards, into getting their radiology tests, into getting their specialist appointments faster than ever before. Thirdly, the cancer treatment. No New Zealander had to wait more than 4 weeks to begin their radiation treatment when they were ready. No New Zealander has had to be sent to Australia since the end of 2008. That's a really significant achievement for New Zealand. And at the middle of this year, we're going to add another pledge to cancer patients. No one needing chemotherapy should have to wait more than 4 weeks to get their treatment. But we're also making huge progress in preventative health measures and dealing with infectious diseases. Isn't it just ironic cant from the party opposite to complain about infectious diseases in New Zealand when they left 30% of 2-year-olds unimmunised when they were last government? 30% of 2-year-olds were not immunised. That's what they left. The number of Maori kids at 2 unimmunised under that crowd, it was like about 53% were immunised. No, I think they did care. I just don't think they did anything about it. But under this government, we have focused on that. We now have 92% of New Zealand 2-year-olds fully immunised. That is protection against infectious diseases. And for a party that spent 9 years talking about closing the gaps and didn't do anything, we have closed the gaps. There is no gap between Maori, Pacific and Pākehā on 2-year-old immunisation in this country. And on rheumatic fever, that crowd put out a strategy in 2001 that said they would halve rheumatic fever by 2005. Well, you know what? They put out the strategy and did nothing. They did nothing. And our rheumatic fever rates are now at third world level. And it took this government, in coalition with the Maori Party, to invest significant amounts of money in rheumatic fever. And I reckon in 3 years' time, when we're on the campaign trail, we will have a record in dealing with rheumatic fever that will be one of the greatest points of pride that this government will have in the run-up to the next election, because we will deal with it. They had a strategy in 2001 and did nothing. They've got 63 health strategies and still couldn't achieve what we've done in 3 years. And we've also dealt with smoking. If we can get fewer people smoking in their homes with their kids, that will deal with respiratory disease. That party had a strategy in 2001 to deal with respiratory disease, put the price of smokes up once and never did it again. We've put the price up of smokes 3 times in a row, and academics say it's the single most
I'm not sure if the member heard the bell. It's a bit ill, but his time has expired.
And so has it for many smokers, Mr. New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, with the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Ian Lees Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, I just have to start where Tony